Theresa Payton is going to join us momentarily. She was the White House Chief Information Officer, and she's the CEO of Fortley Solutions. And Theresa and I, we're going to take a look today at, what the new hoax of the day is, what's happening with China, what was their involvement. And I've said from the very beginning that as far as I'm concerned, I don't have any evidence to it, but whether or not China manufactured this thing, they knew it was coming our way a long time before they mentioned anything. And somewhere in my conspiratorial mind, I think they wanted it to be coming our way. So, I'm going to talk to Theresa about that, but I believe she is with us now. And Theresa Payton from Fortley Solutions joins us now. Hey, Theresa, how are you today?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us. So, I don't know. Sometimes I like to get a little out there on my conspiracy theories to have some fun with my audience. And I have, back in January said, I think, this is just coincidentally right after, they agree to the trade, they agree to phase one of the tariffs, and they make all these promises they're not going to manipulate their currency. And then, right after it, right around when, the Chinese New Year begins, all of a sudden this thing is upon us. And I felt like it was almost a proactive deflationary move to keep everything, level for them.
Yeah, I think your theory and many other theories, nothing's off the table at this point. And, just a little hint for people that are big fans of yours like me. In my book, I actually admit that I'm a conspiracy theorist. So I think, until it's safe enough to actually send boots on the ground inspectors to interview firsthand accounts of people who recovered, patients, people who worked in the labs, what doctors were seeing, until it's safe enough to do that, I think nothing's off the table for the realm of possibility here.
Yeah, well, I don't want to try to not trying to get too far out there, but it seems I just had on Tracy Beans. She's an independent journalist with Uncover DC, and she had told us a few weeks ago that back in as far back as October, November, some U.S. troops traveled to Wuhan for the Military Olympics. They came through Tacoma, Washington airport, so there are other ways it could have got into the country, but nonetheless, right up until January 23rd, China and the WHO was saying that they don't think this is an international emergency, and they see no evidence of human communication. So, someone knew something.
It's interesting what you're talking about here, because, what you and I would call a misinformation campaign, for example, they actually call it something else. They call it public opinion guidance management. And what China is very intent on doing is making sure their own citizens always hold the government regime in the highest regard. So a lot of times that what you and I call misinformation or manipulation campaigns, they're really designed to keep peace with their citizens and for their citizens to trust in what their government is telling them or asking them to do. And then once they kind of hone their tradecraft on their own citizens, they then go out global with their message. So you notice they basically downplayed the numbers. The next thing they did was they told their citizens that China, because of the way they handled everything, gave the world time to prepare. And then as it hit our shores and Europe's shores and other countries, and factories started shutting down, factories that are essential for making things like masks, gloves, producing toilet paper for people who need it. As those shut down, that's when China opened back up and said, by the way, we're open for business and we're here to help the world. So there's a lot going on here. And in some cases, China may mean well. And in other cases, we have to ask, what is it in their overall strategy of trying to promote China as a nation that should be on the world stage, that should have an equal seat at the table with other nations, and what do they have to gain from these misinformation and manipulation campaigns, and see how the answers play out over time.
Yeah, it sure seems to me, there were like these supposedly, videos that got out of China, showing them going around welding people's house doors shut, locking people in, throwing them in cars. So they didn't handle it with the greatest of human rights. But to your point, I see one of the Chinese ambassadors or liaisons says that the U.S. should stop tricking everyone. So is that all part of their, public opinion guidance method?
Yes, it absolutely is. So, what I have observed, and others who watch these manipulation campaigns have observed, is that their own government approved accounts, many of their citizens can't access Twitter, they're blocked from it, but their own government approved Twitter accounts have been promoting different parts of a misinformation manipulation campaign. So, for example, they've said things like the United States needs to answer questions and they need to prove that it didn't come from them. There's been accusations then promoted by manipulation campaigns out of Iran, North Korea, and out of Russia, saying that perhaps the United States military created this as a bioweapon. The next campaign I saw unfold was different Twitter accounts accusing Italy of actually being where patient zero was for COVID-19. Again, deflecting. And that is all part of that misinformation and manipulation campaign to, again, try and show China in the most positive light possible.
Yeah, it sure seems like, they had a playbook from the beginning. You know what I mean? And they know they have the WHO in their pocket in almost every instance. So they were, some people say, they were misguided. I think they were a willing shill in the whole thing by keeping it under wraps until they had their PR campaign right.
I mean, it's very possible, and I do believe that both China as well as WHO, again, we have to get through the pandemic, continue to race for a cure so that we save lives and save people from being damaged by COVID-19. But a thorough investigation is absolutely necessary here to find out who knew what when. Why did that not get communicated? Why was it downplayed in the early stages? Because the story, as you know, changed over time. It started off with like, oh, you had to have direct contact with somebody in Wuhan. And then it just evolved over time into something else. And so a thorough investigation must be done. And candidly, every country should demand it and send over their own independent investigative unit just to make sure there's not kind of one central group that can be swayed or manipulated into not presenting all the facts.
Yeah, well, what about the original reports? It was a rat, it was a bat, it was a cat, it was in a wet market. And now I think there's, universal agreement that a worker at a lab gave it to a, domestic partner or something. So we know it came out of that lab, and even though they're not supposed to have these wet markets operating, and they are, the original information has been proven wrong. It didn't come out of any wet market.
I have seen that theory presented. I don't really have kind of the medical background. I would love to sort of watch, somebody who actually traces diseases back to patient zero, get the opportunity to get all the facts. But I do watch kind of the state-run media out of the nation states of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and other countries. And I have seen the narrative evolve coming out of the state-run medias and out of these social media accounts, both the official accounts as well as what I call, the fake personas. These different fake personas posing as either, kind of Chinese citizens who think their country is doing a great job, that are actually government employees, or posing even as Americans, criticizing different governors or the president or the Hill on their response. And so the manipulation campaigns, unfortunately, are promoting a very bad situation. So, for example, fake cures, how to not get the COVID-19, also misinformation there. And it's just, in many cases, unhelpful, manipulative, but in a very bad way, could be incredibly dangerous to people's healths.
I'm confused on something that I wanted to ask you about, because you have, expertise right into the White House. All of the major leaders on the left, all the Democratic congressional leaders, they think that, I don't know, they keep saying that no, President Trump acted late. He didn't do anything. How come it hasn't, no one says, hey, you guys control the Congress, which means you have the chair of every committee. What did Adam Schiff do in the Intelligence Committee? Was he sounding any alarms over there? Where was the Oversight Committee? Where are the Democratic leadership wants to scream and yell about Trump not acting fast enough, but at the same time, they're in control of every committee in the House. No one did anything, did they? Did I miss something?
It's very interesting. What I will tell you that I did learn from my time at the White House is that I've learned to give people who are on the inside, who have all the facts presented to them, a lot of grace for actions they take or not take, even if I disagree and think I would do something different, because we're not necessarily truly going to know all the facts given in a timeline, how they were presented, and sort of what the dire circumstances and predictions that were provided at the time the facts were provided. So I've always I've walked out of the White House with like a different point of view, and it's not partisan. It's more around, it's just very difficult in that pressure cooker with the data you have to make decisions. And then, basically not everybody knows all the facts as you know them. What I will say, I find challenging for me personally as I look at some of the information is, the information coming out of China was not the full and complete picture. They knew a lot more than they shared with the rest of the world, which is why the rest of the world, for many parts, was kind of on our heels and everybody just trying to make the best decisions they could given incomplete data. So what I would say is could we all have done something different? Well, hindsight's 2020. I know I run a company, I have clients, I have employees, and I look at how things are now and I think, gosh, in those early days, maybe I would have made some different decisions. So I give people a lot of grace. But what I would say to people is just understand the leadership of this country and other countries, they're doing the best they have with the lack of data they were given.
Yeah, it's, I think China, as we know, is probably one of the greatest, propaganda machines of all time. And I even, some of these videos that were coming out of China, I almost was thinking to myself back then, like, they would never let something like this out. So the fact that a lot of these, like, secret pirated videos, I thought even those might be part of China's propaganda campaign to say, hey, you seen what was happening, you had to know something. But it's really scary, and we've never seen what's happening right now in history. But I think from the original projections, we were hearing 2 million people could die, 250,000 people could die. Unfortunately, every one of the 60,000 is terrible. But it does look like that the social distancing and shutting down flights from China did have a pronounced effect on all of the models.
It does appear to be that way. I mean, if you look, for example, at the challenges Italy has faced, Milan and the Milan airport, there are a lot of, there's a very thriving textile economy north of Milan in Italy. And as you know, North Italy has been hit incredibly hard. They do have a very open worker program with China. And so after the Chinese New Year, people left to go back to northern Italy, sort of in the Milan and the northern areas around there, to go back to work. And, the question I think we all have to ask in trying to trace back to patient zero, the question we have to ask is, was China derelict in duty? Should they have shut their borders and say, you know what, we can't send people to other countries right now. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Again, hindsight's 2020, but that's something that certainly needs to be investigated when the coast is clear and it's safe to do so.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time, and hopefully you can join us again, and we'll keep up to speed on everything that's happening out there information-wise.
I would love to do that. And by the way, my new book is available in audio, and because of its launch week for the audiobook. It's free right now if people want to download it.
Okay, and I think I have that on my notes. I'm sorry, but Theresa is the author of Manipulated: Inside the Cyber War to Hijack Elections and Distort the Truth. And I reported on this heavily, that I found it really wild that Pete Buttigieg's technology team were all former Hillaryites, and they licensed their voting app to Illinois, to Iowa to do the primary, and all of a sudden we had a major breakdown, which couldn't declare a winner, and the whole move towards technology. I think we're better off going back to ballots than going forward to technology, personally.
Yeah, we might be. Well, time will tell. We'll be so have me back for another show. We'll talk about paper ballots and election security. I'd love to do that.
All right.
Huge
Well, let's
here.
do that. Let's set that up. Theresa Payton, go check out her book, Manipulated: Inside the Cyber War to Hijack Elections and Distort the Truth. And by the way, right now she's giving you an ebook for free if you want to go out there and check it out. But there's lots of dirty stuff going on in the whole cyber elections game. And not only was I involved in some of that with a company that I belonged to who was trying to put voting on the blockchain, lot of political schemery involved with that stuff. But yeah, we got to have Theresa back and talk about paper ballots and stuff, because that's going to be a huge issue.